Right now, somewhere in the world, a wild crow is standing at the edge of a busy road, watching cars pass. It has a nut in its beak, and it's waiting. Not randomly, not out of confusion, it's waiting for a red light, because it knows that when the light turns red, the cars stop, and it can place the nut on the asphalt. Then the light turns green. The cars roll over the nut and crack it open, then red again, and the crow walks out to collect its meal. This has been filmed, documented, and studied. But the question it raises isn't just about intelligence, it's about something deeper. Because that crow didn't learn this behavior from another crow. It learned it by watching humans. And that changes everything. What does it mean when an animal looks at a human, not another member of its species, not a predator, not food, and decides, this is who I need? That question has been sitting quietly at the edges of animal cognition research for decades. And the answers that are starting to emerge are stranger and more moving than most people realize. Because what scientists are finding isn't just that some animals are clever enough to ask for help, it's that some of them specifically choose humans to ask, and they seem to know exactly what we are. Think about what that requires for a second. To ask for help, you first have to understand that you have a problem. Then you have to understand that another being exists separately from you, with their own knowledge and capabilities. Then you have to judge whether that other being can actually solve your problem. And then you have to communicate. That's not instinct. That's something that looks uncomfortably close to a theory of mind. The ability to model another being's perspective. And for a long time, scientists believed that was uniquely human territory. The formal study of whether animals can understand other minds goes back to a landmark moment in 1978, when David Premack and Guy Woodruff published a paper asking whether chimpanzees have a theory of mind. They were working with a chimp named Sarah, and they showed her video clips of a human actor struggling with problems, trapped behind a locked door, unable to reach food, shivering in the cold. Then they showed Sarah photographs and asked her to pick the one that showed the solution. She could, consistently. She wasn't just watching a scene. She was modeling the human's predicament and reasoning about what would fix it. That paper launched decades of research, and it started a question that still doesn't have a clean answer. If an animal can understand your problem, can it also understand that you could understand theirs? Because that's the flip side of the coin. And that's where things get genuinely extraordinary. If you've ever watched nature documentaries carefully, you may have noticed something that gets less attention than it deserves. There are documented cases, not anecdotes, but filmed, studied, peer-reviewed cases of wild animals approaching humans, specifically when they are in distress and need something only a human can provide. Not domesticated animals, wild ones. Animals with no training, no prior relationship with people, no reason drawn from survival logic to trust a creature that is often their greatest threat. And yet, they come. They make contact. They wait. They seem to be doing something that, in a human, we would call asking. If that idea pulls at something in you, if you've ever looked at an animal and wondered what it actually perceives when it looks back, you're in exactly the right place. This channel exists entirely for that question. Subscribe and stay close, because we are going to keep pulling on that thread. One of the most studied and striking cases involves not exotic wildlife, but an animal you probably pass without much thought: moray eels. In a 2006 paper published in Biology Letters, researchers documented a behavior in coral grouper fish, a predatory species, that stopped them completely. When groupers couldn't flush prey out of a coral crevice, they were observed swimming to where moray eels rested and performing a specific, head-shaking gesture. The morays responded by following the groupers back to the hiding spot, entering the crevice from a different angle, and flushing the prey out into open water where both could hunt. The groupers were recruiting a collaborator. They were communicating a problem and soliciting a specific solution from a specific partner. The researchers who documented this, led by Ridwan Bashiri, described it as referential gesturing, a communication form previously thought to be exclusive to great apes and humans. But here's where it gets strange. Bashiri's team also observed that when a human diver appeared near a crevice where prey was hidden, groupers performed the same head-shaking gesture toward the diver, toward the human, a fish, signaling to a human, in the wild. That detail is easy to gloss over, but sit with it for a moment. A grouper fish, not a mammal, not a primate, not an animal, we generally credit with complex cognition, recognized a large, novel creature as a potential collaborator, generated a signal to recruit it, and directed that signal specifically at the human's face. There was no training, no conditioning, no prior reward. Something in that fish's processing identified the human as an agent who might help. That is not a reflex. That is a decision. Now take that logic and apply it to dolphins. Because the dolphin cases are where things move from fascinating to genuinely moving. In 2013, off the coast of Hawaii, a bottlenose dolphin approached a group of scuba divers during a night dive. The divers, led by Martina Wing, noticed immediately that something was wrong. The dolphin was swimming erratically and circling them in a way that wasn't aggressive or playful. It was something else. When one of the divers looked more closely, they could see a fishing hook and line entangled around the dolphin's pectoral fin, cutting into the skin. And then the dolphin did something that still makes researchers pause when they read the account. It stopped. It oriented its injured fin directly toward the diver who had been looking at it, and it held still. The diver removed the hook and cut the line. The dolphin waited through the entire process, completely motionless, and then swam away. The encounter was recorded on video and has been analyzed in multiple discussions of cetacean cognition and intentional help-seeking. What makes this case extraordinary isn't just the behavior, it's the inference it requires. That dolphin had to understand, first, that it had a problem it could not solve alone. Second, that these unfamiliar beings, air-breathing, clumsy, encased in black rubber, were capable of solving it. Third, that approaching them and presenting the problem in a visible way would trigger a helpful response. That chain of reasoning is the same chain a human child uses when they bring a broken toy to an adult and hold it out. We recognize that immediately in children. We call it communication. We call it trust. The dolphin did it in the dark ocean, with a species it had no evolutionary reason to trust. And it worked. What do you think was happening inside that dolphin's mind in that moment? Was there something that felt like fear, or pain, or hope? Leave a comment. I want to know what you believe. The scientific conversation around these questions connects directly to one of the most important documents in the history of animal cognition. In July 2012, a group of prominent neuroscientists gathered at the University of Cambridge and signed what became known as the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness, authored by Philip Lowe and formally signed in the presence of Stephen Hawking. The declaration stated explicitly that non-human animals possess the neurological substrates that generate consciousness. It covered mammals, birds, and notably octopuses. What that document formalized was something researchers had been circling for years. The architecture of subjective experience is not uniquely human, and if subjective experience exists, then so does need. So does the possibility of recognizing that a problem exists, feeling that it matters, and deciding to do something about it. That reframes the question entirely. When an animal approaches a human for help, it isn't performing a mechanical subroutine. It is, by the terms of the Cambridge Declaration, a conscious being making a choice in the presence of an experienced need. That is not a small thing. The cases where this becomes hardest to look at clinically involve great apes, because their cognitive proximity to us makes the emotional weight almost impossible to hold at arm's length. Frans de Waal, the primatologist whose decades of research fundamentally changed how science thinks about animal emotion and empathy, documented extensively how chimpanzees and bonobos not only comfort each other in distress, but seek out comfort from specific individuals they trust. They choose who to approach. They modulate their behavior based on who they are approaching. That's not generic help-seeking. That's relationship-based trust. And then there's Washoe. Washoe was a chimpanzee who became the first non-human animal to learn American Sign Language, as part of research begun by Alan and Beatrix Gardner in 1966. She acquired over 350 signs. She used them spontaneously. She used them to make requests, to express emotion, to comment on things she was seeing. But one moment from Washoe's life stands apart from all the vocabulary tests and cognition papers. When her caretaker, Kat, returned to work after a miscarriage, she told Washoe what had happened using sign language. Washoe, who had lost 2 infants of her own, looked at Kat and signed the word, cry. Then she reached through the bars and took Kat's hand. She didn't sign it as a question. She signed it as recognition. She had understood grief, and she had reached across the boundary of species to touch it. That moment is documented. It is not sentimental embellishment. And it sits at the center of something that science is still learning to measure: the capacity of an animal not just to ask a human for help, but to offer it. Because in that moment, Washoe wasn't seeking anything. She was giving, which leads to the deepest and most quietly radical implication of all this research. If animals can recognize human distress and reach toward it, if they can assess our need, decide to respond, and act, then the question of whether animals ask humans for help has an answer. And the answer is yes. But it opens something larger and harder to close. It means the relationship isn't one-directional. It means that when you sit next to an animal, when you look into its eyes and feel something passing between you, that feeling may not be projection. It may be accurate perception. The animal may be reading you as clearly as you are trying to read it. The philosopher Thomas Nagel, in his 1974 essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat?, argued that there is something it is like to be a bat, that subjective experience exists in non-human animals and that we may never fully access it. But what the science of help-seeking suggests is something Nagel didn't fully explore. That the animals may not be waiting for us to access their inner world. That they are already trying to access ours. Already bringing us their problems. Already holding out their injured fins. Already reaching through the bars. There is a whale who changed the way researchers think about grief. In 2018, an orca named Tahlequah from the southern resident population of the Pacific Northwest gave birth to a calf that died within half an hour. For 17 days, Tahlequah carried her dead calf at the surface of the water. She swam hundreds of miles with it. She refused to let it sink. Researchers from the Center for Whale Research, who had been monitoring this population for decades, had never documented anything like it. The behavior was eventually described in scientific literature as an apparent mourning ritual. Tahlequah was doing something that had no survival benefit, no genetic logic, no mechanical explanation. She was refusing to let go. And the researchers who watched her said that the image of it, that whale, alone, carrying something the ocean kept trying to take from her, was something none of them could simply classify and file away. In 2020, Tahlequah had another calf. That one survived. Researchers named it Phoenix. The open loop you've been carrying since the beginning of this video, the crow at the traffic light, waiting, watching, learning from humans, closes here. Because the crow isn't just intelligent. It isn't just adaptive. That crow looked at an entire human system, roads, lights, vehicles, timing, and understood how to use it. It recruited human infrastructure to solve a problem. Without asking permission, without being taught, it looked at what humans had built and saw, somehow, a tool it could use. And somewhere in that calculation was a recognition of humans as agents, as beings who built things, who created patterns, who could be understood and worked with and, in a sense, collaborated with, even without a word passing between them. You don't need to anthropomorphize animals to feel the weight of that. You just need to pay attention. Because the science is pointing to something that human intuition has always suspected but struggled to defend in polite, empirical company. That we are not alone in here. That other minds are moving through this world alongside ours. That they notice us. That they need things, feel things, and sometimes in moments of pain or urgency or something that may very well be hope, they turn toward us. If this video gave you something to carry with you today, hit like and share it with someone who loves animals and asks real questions about them. And come back, because we are only just beginning to learn what is happening behind those eyes.